ever try to find a cheat code for reality? Not like spiritually or philosophically. I mean, literally. Like you're playing a game and you go online and search, how do I break this? There's always someone in a forum who figured out how to clip through a wall or duplicate items or spawn infinite money. I was thinking about this because of something from last episode. We talked about the hard ceiling on intelligence. There's something you can't understand from inside your own architecture. But here's the thing that wouldn't leave my head. What if you don't need to understand it? What if you can just break the system before you understand it? What if consciousness isn't supposed to be asking these questions? And asking them anyway is the glitch. Let's talk about code, real code, programming code. Because if reality is information, if it's a simulation running on something like a computer, then it has source code. Source code is just the set of instructions written by the programmer that tells the computer what to do. It's human readable, mostly. You look at it and you understand the logic, the function, why things happen the way they do. But here's what's wild. Most programmers never actually read the source code of the systems they depend on. You use tools, frameworks, libraries. They work. You don't need to know how. It's abstracted away. You work at a layer where the details are hidden. What if consciousness is like that? What if you're working at the highest abstraction layer and the source code, the actual rules of physics, the equations that govern reality, is hidden beneath you? And maybe it has to be, because if you could read it directly, you'd see something that breaks your mind. But here's the problem. Sometimes you encounter a bug, a glitch, something that doesn't make sense. And when you do, your instinct is to go looking for the source code, to understand why it's broken. There's a category of phenomenon that physicists call anomalies. These are observations that don't fit the model. The data doesn't match the theory, and sometimes anomalies reveal something huge. Dark matter, dark energy, the fine-tuning of fundamental constants, quantum entanglement. We call these anomalies. But what if we're calling them that because we can't see the source code that explains them? There's also something called the simulation hypothesis glitches. These are weirdly specific experiences that people report. The Mandela Effect. Thousands of people remembering something differently than how it actually is. Déjà vu, the uncanny feeling that you've experienced a moment before. Synchronicity, the creepy alignment of seemingly unrelated events. Now, these could all just be quirks of human memory and perception. Probably are. But what if they're not? What if they're moments where the abstraction layer fails, where someone catches a glimpse of the mechanism underneath? What if a Mandela effect is a version conflict? The simulation rolled back to an older save state in one region but not another, and two different people remember different versions of reality because they literally experienced different code. Every complex piece of software has a debug mode, a way for the programmer to see what's happening under the hood. Variables, stack traces, the actual state of the system. Is consciousness a debug mode? Think about it. Consciousness is the one thing that the system seems to have made weirdly transparent. You can observe your own thought process. You can think about your thinking. You have access to some of the variables. You can introspect. What if that's a vulnerability? What if the programmer left a debug interface open and consciousness is it? And by asking the hard questions, why does anything exist? What is time? What is death? You're actually running debug commands on the simulation. And the more you debug, the more glitches you find, the more things that don't make sense, the more the system becomes unstable around you. Here's something that's always fascinated me. Prayer is code. Not metaphorically. It actually has a lot in common with how you'd upload instructions to a computer. You formulate intent. You vocalize it, or think it intensely. You believe, or simulate belief, that something is listening and will process your request. And then, sometimes, something happens. Not always, in ways you can't predict, but the structure is there. What if prayer is just a user trying to execute a command they don't have the syntax for? What if the rituals, the repetition, the faith, that's all just different ways of trying to access an API that's not officially documented? And what if it sometimes works because the programmer left a backdoor, an uplink, a way for consciousness, for the debug mode, to actually submit requests to the higher level system? I'm not saying God is real and listening to prayers. I'm saying if you're a consciousness running in a simulation and you figure out that you're running in a simulation, the natural next step is to try to contact whoever's running it. Okay, I'm going to push back on all of this because this is the kind of thinking that can go off the rails really fast. Apophenia is a real thing. It's when humans see patterns in random noise. We're wired to find meaning. We see faces in clouds. We see destiny in coincidence. We're meaning-making machines, and if you start looking for glitches in reality, you'll find them, because your brain is literally trained to see patterns. The Mandela Effect might just be how human memory works, constructive, not reproductive. Déjà vu might just be a neurological quirk. Synchronicity might just be statistics. Given enough events, some of them will align by pure chance. And prayer working might just be confirmation bias and selection bias and the placebo effect and the fact that when you're desperate enough to pray, you're usually in a state of mind where almost anything feels like an answer. That's probably all true, actually. I'm not saying the skeptical explanations are wrong. But here's what I keep coming back to. The universe is so fundamentally bizarre that it wouldn't shock me if there were exploits. If consciousness is a debug mode, and the debug mode has access to some subset of the system's commands, then praying, ritual, meditation. These might be the fuzzy, imprecise, accidental ways that humans have discovered to use those commands. So why am I spending an entire episode theorizing about cheat codes and debug modes and prayer as API calls? Because if any of this is true, even partially, it changes the question. It changes what you're supposed to do with your consciousness. If you're just a brain running through predetermined states, then you're a passenger, a witness to your own life. But if consciousness is actually a debug mode, if your ability to introspect and question and think about thinking is a vulnerability in the system, then you're not a passenger. You're a potential exploit, an anomaly. And that means the most important thing you can do is ask the hard questions. Keep prodding, keep looking for the glitches, keep trying to read the source code. Not to break the system, not to escape, but to understand it, to become so conscious of the mechanism that you're almost a collaborator with whoever or whatever designed it. Next episode, we're going to build on this. We're going to talk about free will, about whether you're actually choosing anything at all, or whether you're just running a script. And if you are just running a script, what that means for the only thing you've got control over, your attention. If you like this, share it. If you're skeptical, great. That means you're thinking critically. If you believe this is all true, also great. That means you're already starting to debug. I'm your host, Travis R. Barlow. This has been The Existence Experiment. And remember, if you're going to break the simulation, at least ask yourself why first.